Right, so I'm not even going to pretend that I have any idea of what's going on in my life anymore. We are just going to talk about books. Hi everybody, I'm Roxy. This is Chaotic Bibliophile. I apologize for the inconsistent uploads. I've missed a couple of weeks. I don't even remember which ones. I am kind of finishing my master's. Thankfully, everything's been going well. I've been traveling. My mom came to visit. That was amazing. I am so done being behind on wrap-ups. So I thought I should just try to get through as many books as I can in a couple of videos. Because if I label like March wrap-up, December wrap-up, people are not going to watch. So let's just talk about books that I've read that I haven't reviewed on the channel yet. I will try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. Yeah, let's see how I fare. So here I have the physical copy of The Sinner and the Saint by Kevin Birmingham, Dostoevsky, A Crime and Its Punishment, and this is the embodiment for all the Booktube prize books that I read probably in March that I haven't wrapped up, or February if I filmed that. I don't even remember anymore. So anyways, I'll just link the Booktube prize video so you can check it out. I am almost certain I am not keeping this book, so that should give you a clue. All of those books are nonfiction, by the way. I was a judge for the first round nonfiction. I have not signed up for the following rounds, but I will try to sign up for the finals if they still need people. One very short and sweet book, a Spanish edition of two of Natsume Souseki's essays, Bicycle Diaries and Letters to London, or Letter from London rather. This is a very, very beautiful book that I actually bought on the last outing that my dad and I had before I moved to London. You know, it's significant because Letter from London, blah, blah, blah. But I also really enjoyed these essays. Basically, Souseki came to UCL to study English literature, and he was really passionate about it, but he was very miserable while in London. He missed home, he was dirt poor, and spent whatever money he had on books. Who am I to judge that choice? And he also tried cycling and he failed miserably at it. It's just a very funny and interesting look at that sort of cultural clash. Really recommend it if you're into essays, if you're into Souseki, definitely worth checking out. I'm sure there are English language editions of his essays. Now, I also have a short story by Hanif Kureishi, My Son the Fanatic, and this is part of the Favorite Stories booklets, which I love. I understand people might find them a bit pricey at 3.5 quid each, but if you're ever in Bristol, there is this store that has everything at £3, and these ones they had at £1. And you know, as a short story enthusiast, as a novella enthusiast, I think 1 quid for these babies is fair. Anyways, this is set in England. I don't remember if in London, but it's about this man's son who becomes a religious fanatic, and it's a comment on religion and cultural clash in England, being from an immigrant family, etc. It was really, really good. I didn't have high hopes for this one because I didn't like Intimacy by Kureishi. Although I liked the writing, I thought that novella was so self-indulgent, but this one was actually truly great, and I gave it a chance because a friend of mine really, really likes it, and I don't regret it. So would recommend. Then I have two books by Sara Baume. This is actually a reread. This was one of my favorite reads of the whatever year it was that I originally read it. Did I say this is a line made by walking? I should have. This was nominated for the Goldsmiths Prize, which is a prize that I used to follow not religiously. Like, I've never read the shortlist, but I intended to at some point, maybe one day. Anyways, I reread this because I wrote on it for my master's, and I really enjoyed it. I am now a declared Sara Baume fan. I mean, I was before, but after studying someone, you always come out of it either really loving them more or really hating them and not wanting to read them ever again. Sometimes both can be true, but in my case, I just realized why I resonate with Sara Baume so much. And so this is an auto-fictional tale of Frankie, who is this typical millennial struggling to live, sort of artsy kid after having a breakdown while working at an art gallery in Dublin. She decides to move to her dead grandma's bungalow in West Cork. She begins this project photographing dead animals, and she includes the pictures in the book. It's, you know, very fragmented. It discusses art and life and nature. These are all obsessions that are really important to Baume's work. It's really good. It's really one of those narratives where nothing happens. It's called A Line Made by Walking because it references different works and also the action of Frankie just going out and exploring the wilderness and finding these corpses. It is really interesting. I really recommend it if you like thinky woman narratives where nothing happens, but there's lots of great insights. And she's a great writer, so the fragments are really well written. And if you like A Line Made by Walking, I also recommend Handiwork, which is almost a non-fiction counterpart. I also wrote about this for a different essay, so I'm just really milking Sara Baume for all she's worth. I am so looking forward to reading her newest novel, but I haven't bought it yet, and I don't think I will for some time because yeah. In any case, this is her talking about her daily handiwork, and she really ties it into a genealogy of craftsmanship. She talks about William Maurice and Stephen Knott, but she also relates it to her dad and granddad because they were both in their own ways craftsmen. It's very vulnerable and authentic, and I really like how she writes. She also includes pictures. She kind of transforms her texts into gallery spaces, which I think is really remarkable. And you can see, again, it's very fragmentary. I love these styles of books, but it really needs to be well done. And this one is excellently done. I really, really recommend it. But again, not for everyone if you don't like these sort of books. But if you do, great choice. More thinky books where nothing happens, but a lot of things happen. Two Sebalds, actually, The Emigrants and The Rings of Saturn. These are translated by Michael Hulse. The Emigrants. Is the other also translated by Michael Hulse? Yes. I read these for my master's, actually. We had a whole seminar on Sebald, and it was really interesting. I didn't know Sebald was such a big deal before coming to the UK, which has been the case with a lot of stuff that I've studied here. This one is literally Sebald taking a trip to the coast and thinking, well, of course it's more than that, and it also has pictures, although the pictures are doing something quite different than the Baume. Here the pictures are sort of trying to lend legitimacy to the narrative, but at the same time they aren't real. Not real, that's not the word, but they aren't authentic. The narrative attached to the pictures is fabricated. So it really interrogates this idea of history and the past and what can we believe in these narratives. These really toe the line between fiction and non-fiction, which is very, very interesting. The Emigrants in particular is about 4 different Jewish emigres in the 20th century, and of course it engages with the Holocaust and narratives of exile and loss and all that baggage. A lot has been written on these books, so there's nothing really I can say that will be profound or insightful, especially on a time crunch. But I really enjoyed these both. First of all, I think the prose is just good on a sentence by sentence level. It has these beautiful moments of clarity, whether it's talking about the landscape itself or the reflections in terms of individuality and collective history and personal history and memory and place and history and all the different networks that make up a personal and collective history. All of those are so well explored in here. But if you don't like, dense narratives where nothing happens, then you probably won't like these. These, in contrast to the ones that we found nowadays, so if we think of Sheila Heti or Sara Baume, those are much, much more fragmentary, whereas this, even if you look at the text, right, it's so much denser and it's almost like a stream rather than the fragments that we find today. I really want to read more Sebald. I want to read Vertigo next. Again, I don't know when that will be, but really looking forward to more. Really recommend it if you are into travel writing, if you like landscape, and very philosophical, but still really poetically written. I don't know if poetic is the right word, but it is what I would say. It's beautiful writing. And then I also reread Maurice by E.M. Forster. This was again for class, and I reiterate that I do not like this book. I think it's an interesting book. I think there's a lot to be discussed about it, but I just don't think it's very good. Forster is a good writer, like sentence by sentence. I have yet to read his best works. You can tell that he's struggling to get it out there, like tell this story, but he is self-censoring and he's fighting against those instances and he's revising and revising and it feels so inorganic. So what is this about? Very important. This is about Maurice, who is a gay man in the earlier 20th century, I think. So this was written around 1914 or something like that. So I think it's said like in the present. And anyways, homosexuality is illegal. And what Forster was trying to do here was sort of offer an alternative narrative, a narrative where the protagonist didn't end up killing themselves, basically. That might sound like a spoiler, I'm sorry if it is, but there's much more going on. So yeah, Maurice initially falls in love with a classmate at Cambridge, I want to say. Things ensue. There's also some bit about the family, but it's mostly about their own relationship and self-discovery, and it's just very tortured and dull. It has great moments, I will give you that, but I just think as a book it is objectively not very well constructed, and I think that is mostly due to the book's origins. He was famously very prolific at the beginning of his career, and then he didn't publish anything, and this was published posthumously, even though he died I think in 1970 or so. So there's a lot of discourse around why he didn't publish it at a certain point where he could have. This was something that he needed to write for himself, but because of all the pressures and because of his personal relation to this subject matter, he just didn't do a good job. I'm sorry, I don't think it's a good book. Okay, another campus novel, complete opposite. Dear Committee Members by Julie Schumacher. This is a brilliant epistolary novel by the same author who created the Shakespeare Requirement, which actually I started reading and didn't gel with. So I didn't DNF it. I sort of stopped and assumed at some point I would go back to it, but I never did, and it's back in Santiago, so who knows. It is not a book that is high on the priority list to have sent over when someone comes to visit. Yes, I do that because I have a problem. However, I was curious to check this one out because it is exclusively told in emails that this guy Jason Fitker, who is a professor in the English department at this university, writes, and it's mostly letters of recommendations, though not exclusively. This is both hilarious, enraging, and so real. It's satire at its best. Clearly, Julie Schumacher knows exactly what she's talking about. She crafts this character who is kind of exasperating because he is very old school academia, but at the same time, he's so sincere and he believes in academia in spite of all the grim aspects and the fact that, you know, the English department is shrinking and that a lot of students aren't getting good placements or good job opportunities, or, you know, that a lot of students don't necessarily take his creative writing course seriously. In spite of all of that, he still believes in literature and in academia and the power of writing well, and he's still very humane in spite of everything. So although he is enraging and exasperating, and I think a lot of people might not like him, he's definitely not a likable character. The whole book is very likable because, like all great books with quote-unquote unreliable narrators, if you want to call him that, it manages to show you how this character's perceptions of things might not be accurate. So it's just great fun. I reviewed notes on a thesis in my last video, link down below, and compared to that one, which is very depressing, this is one that I think even if you are in the thick of it, you can still read and enjoy and won't leave you in a pit of despair, even though it does portray the ugly, uncomfortable side of academia. So I really recommend it. And finally, another book on academia, well, kind of, but it is about academia. I'm sorry, Bewilderment by Richard Powers. This I talked about in my best books of 2021, not the fiction category, of course. I really enjoyed The Overstory by Richard Powers, and I like it a lot. I think this one's tighter, so I think if you had to choose, probably read this one. Although I did get into it with someone who thought this was too sentimental, which I think is not the case in The Overstory. Both are about the same themes, which are basically connection, environment. I think both can be classified as which is like climate fiction, right? But whereas the overstory is about the big picture and these moments of connections between virtual strangers, this one is about a father and his son, who is referred to as being on the autism spectrum, which might as well be true. But the narrator, who's the father, says the son has gotten many diagnoses, some sort of neurodivergence, and it's about a treatment that the son undergoes, what happens after that. The father is an academic, and so we see not only him trying to navigate his research and his work while being a single parent because the mom has recently passed away, but we also see him trying to understand, or rather decide, whether it is good that his son is going through them, but also that he is basically the poster child for them. And it's about scientific knowledge and the ethics behind it. And it is also about empathy and, again, the environment. It is fascinating. If you like neuroscience, you need to check this one out. It's just so good. As I said, some people have found it too sentimental. I disagree. I think it does tug at your heartstrings, but it's not manipulative or anything. I just think it's a great book, and I'm glad I got myself like a signed copy, hardcover, because this was one of those rare occasions where I bought it and I read it almost right away. So there you go. And I will mention one more book that I also haven't wrapped up, which is Kreutzer Sonata by Lev Tolstoy. This is a Spanish edition translated by Gonzalo Guillén Monge. I talked about this in a separate video, which was my, I want to say, January low-key overdue book club review and discussion. All of those videos, by the way, contain a spoiler-free review section and then a discussion section where I discuss the book in varying degrees of depth. So this is about a man who is telling I was going to say prisoners because they feel like they are prisoners of this guy who's telling this never-ending story, but they are passengers, that's the word, on a train. And this guy who has killed his wife is telling them why. Yeah. If you saw that video, you know that I was a bit disappointed about this book. I like the writing because I like how Tolstoy writes, but I didn't love this book. I had issues with how the story was told and the implications, but I still enjoyed it and I'm glad I read it. So if you want to know more, make sure to check out that video. And that's it. I did talk about a lot of books, so I did move some of the reviewing out of the way, which makes me so happy. I will be back with another one of those probably in like 2 weeks time, hopefully, because I do need to upload the Sayaka Murata review, the review for Entangled Life, which I am only halfway through. Shameful, I know, but I will catch up. And of course, I will release the pick for July. So yeah, please tell me what you've been reading, what have you been hating or enjoying. That sounds like I care more about the hating, which is not true. I care about everything that you've been reading. So just let me know. Or if you've been listening to something interesting or watching something interesting, please be my guest. The comments are open. And that's it. See you next time.